So, heading off into that, we are now into the cash and carry policy. So, with the cash and carry policy, let me make sure what we reviewed and did. Perfect. We are now heading into what is known as interventionism. So, from cash and carry down to the very bottom, I want you to write down, bracket that, and write the word interventionism. Interventionism. Cash and carry all the way down. Interventionism. So this is where we are now going to begin to intervene. We have tried to quarantine them. We have tried to appease them. We have tried to just stay out of it, and it's not working. So now we're going to move towards war. Okay? And we begin with what's known as the cash and carry policy. Now, this is one of those, for those of you who keep telling me to do things illegal, okay? This is one of those, like, under-the-table transactions. So it's not like I'm breaking the law because I'm paying in cash. So what they do is this. If you want to buy a boat from us, you can have it as long as you pay us in cash. Because technically, that's not a credit issue, and that's not a government issue. You're just paying us in cash for a good, just like buying an apple from the store. So what we do is we begin to massively sell arms and ammunition over into Europe, especially into Britain. Now, this cash and carry policy was an attempt to be able to help them out without actually being in the war itself. Now, when we talk, though, again, who do you think drew this? Dr. Seuss, who, by the way, Dr. Seuss, you can actually use in an essay as a key term because he was very critical of America's involvement. According to this cartoon, who could interpret for me, by the way, how this cash and carry, which is the boat, how is the cash and carry affecting America?
It's shutting up and telling you.
It's shutting up, or what is it doing?
Oh, I thought it's
What, Jacob? Hold on, let me hear Jacob. What do you think? Exactly. So cash and carry is our starter for moving in towards war. So cash and carry is kind of like our starting point of now we're moving into a war type environment. Now, along with this though, we start to make some changes. We passed an act called the Selective Training and Service Act. This is in 1940. Now we're going to start to draft people. But we're not going to war, right? We're just drafting people. Oh, and we're going to start training people for war. And we're going to start manufacturing guns. But we're not in the war, right? Do you see what we're doing? Yeah. We're preparing for war. Next to interventionism, I would write preparedness. This is when we prepare towards war. By the way, preparedness policy is actually a real term. It's where we are preparing towards war. We're not in the war. We're just prepping for the war. Okay? So we start to draft people, and we begin to prepare ourselves towards war. Now, this also begins what's known as the draft. Now, we've talked about the draft before, right? This, by the way, is our first peacetime draft. So the very first and one of the only peacetime drafts that we do is in World War II. That means we drafted people without being in a war. Now, we're going to start to draft these people as preparing, but we're not going to do the massive drafts that we do following Pearl Harbor. Now, our next policy that we're going to do, though, is I want you to think of a situation. I want you to pretend that you live in a house and your neighbor's house is on fire. Okay? FDR is going to basically defend his actions with cash and carry by saying this. If your neighbor's house is on fire, wouldn't you want to make sure that your own house isn't going to be put on fire? So you're going to, if you've seen a fire or like a wildfire, you're supposed to take the hose and you're supposed to spray down your house in order to prevent it from catching on fire. So if my neighbor's house is burning, would I not want to start protecting my own house? That's what he's saying here. So he's not saying we're going to war. We're just starting to protect our own house from being lit on fire. That's FDR's defense of this. Now, in terms of our next step, this is like part 2 of moving towards war. Lendlease Act. So now what we're going to say is this. We are not going to sell you arms and ammunition. We are going to lend it to you. You're just borrowing it. You're going to give it back to us at the end of the war. But for right now, you're just borrowing our stuff. So we're going to start to send millions upon millions of dollars worth of materials and goods over into Europe. If you look at this right here, this is in billions of dollars. Within only a few months of the Lendlease Act being passed, we send about $6 billion worth of aid, and eventually by the end of the war, $11.1 billion. We lend it to them in order to be able to prepare towards war. Now again, we're not in the war, right? We're faking the war. That's kind of what's going on here. Now, FDR's Arsenal of Democracy may or may not be on the exam, but at least you have an aware of what's going on. Basically what he said is America is the great arsenal of democracy. This is a great example of manifest destiny, but instead of God telling us to go west, it's us saying we need to spread democracy. So FDR is going to justify this intervention by saying we are the great democracy in the world. It's our job to spread that democracy towards everybody else. So, I want to read this quote really quickly. So this is a really good sourcing for FDR's Arsenal of Democracy. As planes and ships and guns and shells are produced, your government with its defense experts can then determine how best to use them to defend this hemisphere. The decision as to how much shall be sent abroad and how much shall remain at home must be made on the basis of overall military necessities. We must be the great arsenal of democracy. For us, this is an emergency as serious as war itself. So again, we're not in the war. We're just in an emergency status. We must apply ourselves to our task with the same resolution, the same sense of urgency, the same spirit of patriotism and sacrifice as if we were to show we are at war. So we are basically pretending we are at war when we're actually not in war at all. Now, FDR is going to base this off of what's known as the four freedoms. Again, this is basically democracy. This is saying this is what we want in the world, and we're going to defend it. So, freedom of expression, freedom to worship God in their own way, freedom from want, and freedom from fear. Okay? So we're beginning into kind of the Bill of Rights situation. So we're right on the peak of starting into this war. That's Lendlease Act. I don't know why I put it there. Okay? Now, Atlantic Charter is a starred term. This is pretty much our final agreement before we head into Pearl Harbor. The Atlantic Charter was an agreement between Great Britain and America. And we are going to pledge 5 things. This is what we are going to say we are going to defend. Collective security, self-determination, economic cooperation, disarmament, which means disarming another person, and freedom of the seas. This is our final tipping point, which is in 1940, before we go into war. Now, we are moving towards war in more ways than we think. For example, have you heard of a thing called the Girl Scouts? Yeah. Probably have heard of that before. You're also in Girl Scout cookie season, so you should be ready to go on that. Now, why do the Girl Scouts matter at this time? Now, the Girl Scouts started actually following World War I. But here's what begins to happen. You see, the original Girl Scout uniform looked like what it looks like on the left. Now, you're going to notice what's on the left is kind of a military style of uniform. This is called the Brownie uniform. It was the original uniform of all the Girl Scouts. Now, something you're going to notice as you move on, okay, this is originally, while it has some buttons, it's actually a zippered back. So you unzip it, get in, there's uniform. Notice as you go on, do you guys see how they start to have buttons? Do you guys see that? And the patches start to come out. Originally they didn't have patches, they had paper. Why they are doing this? Zippers can be used in war. Metal can be used in war. The Girl Scouts began to switch towards having a buttoned uniform because that war material, what do you think that they can use that for instead? Guns, ships, whatever it could possibly be. So people begin to notice changes in their everyday life that people aren't realizing is basically a precursor to war. The girls in the Girl Scouts were like, oh, we're just having a new uniform. While the Girl Scout organization itself, which used to be very much in line with the American government as a whole, it's aligned in general, begins to say, we're going to start to change this because we know war is coming. Do you guys see how people's warning bells are starting to go off? We're starting to move towards war. Now, growing tension with Japan. This right here, if you'll write next to this, causes of Pearl Harbor. A lot of people don't understand why did we go to war with Japan? Why did Japan bomb us? Well, Japan was very much into Lebensraum. Remember, expanding into Asia. Now, this idea of Lebensraum begins to move into China. America supports China because we like to trade. So China's opposition means America begins to oppose into Japan. Now, as Japan begins to expand all across Asia, oops, I guess I didn't put a picture, so you get to listen to me talk. Now, with Japan expanding, America starts to realize that they are losing control of the Pacific. We know that there's oil there. We know that there are key ports there, and we begin to lose it. We know that we don't want to lose the control of the Pacific. So what we institute is what is called a tariff and a blockade. We block trade by 90% into Japan. Imagine if you have a country of around 50 million people who don't have food because you can't transport it in, or they don't have oil, or they don't have enough metal to be able to create their ships. Japan gets angry. Attacking Pearl Harbor was an attempt to get America to stop annoying them. They want to say, just let us be. We're going to attack here, you're going to be done, and we are now going to be able to continue and take over the Pacific. They were not trying to take over America. They were trying to get control of the Pacific. Now, probably it would have eventually, gone around and gone into the Americas, but at the time, that's what they did. Which brings us to Pearl Harbor. Pearl Harbor is the trigger point. This is the Archduke Franz Ferdinand. This is our trigger point of going into war. Now, in terms of the effects of Pearl Harbor, or what happened, or why Pearl Harbor was so effective. Now, Pearl Harbor was our main military base in the Pacific. We had the vast majority of our naval ships, the entire Pacific Fleet, at Pearl Harbor. Now, what we had, what is known as Battleship Row. Now, if you notice, the idea was to actually save space. If you put all the ships next to each other, you have more space to make more ships. Well, if you look right here, all of them are lined up perfectly in a row. And how Japan looks at that is Japan's going to say, that looks just like the game Battleship, which, by the way, was created because of World War II. It's perfect, right? If you've ever played Battleship, by the way, and you have that one person who puts all their ships in the corner, you hit one, you hit them all, and you win the game. Okay? That's what happens here. It is so easy to be able to bomb this by just attacking it. Now, Japan is going to begin with the first wave, which is the Battleship Row. First wave goes out, which is the equivalent of 100 ships, and begins to bomb this. Pearl Harbor goes down in about 45 minutes. We're talking about massive ships sinking. The Arizona sinks directly down. The Oklahoma flips upside down and capsizes. Thousands of people die. Overall, the Pearl Harbor itself had 2,100 deaths. It is the second deadliest day in American history behind 9/11. Okay? From Battleship Row, we now have the second wave. They're not going to attack all the planes, and they're going to attack the airships. Their goal was to destroy a fleet that could, in theory, attack Japan. Now, in terms of the death toll, which I think I might have... Jessica, does that say tracking on or off? On. Okay. So in terms of the death toll overall, after all of that is said and done, 2,300 people total die. That includes the amount missing that we're going to assume are dead, as well as 1,000 casualties, as in people who were injured. This was a massive attack. Now, this, by the way, happened at 8 a.m. on a Sunday. People were asleep. People were at church. A lot of people thought it was a drill. The vast majority of people at Pearl Harbor had never seen combat before. This was their very first time. And this really was a true wake-up call for America. The day after Pearl Harbor occurred, FDR goes in front of Congress and asks for a declaration of war. Now, why that's important? Congress has to be asked in order to go to war. They have 90 days from the time ground troops are sent to be able to declare war. So FDR can't just say we're going to war. He has to ask for a declaration. Same thing happened with George W. Bush following 9/11. Now, in terms of the massive amounts dead, and this, by the way, this number went skyrocket high once they started finding bodies. By the way, 600 have actually never been identified. One in Utah actually was identified about 2 months ago as one of the people who had died in Pearl Harbor. So Pearl Harbor becomes the starting point for our attempts into the war. Now, who has ever been here? Okay, a good amount of people, right? This is the Pearl Harbor Memorial. Does anybody know what ship is underneath it? The Arizona. Why the Arizona is so famous? Because the Arizona sunk immediately down. Out of all the ships, a lot of ships actually were able to survive. 80% were able to be reused, including the USS Utah. So USS Utah was there as well. But the Arizona is the memorial site for Pearl Harbor. Now, something really interesting, though, about this. So these ships have not been disturbed. They're basically a tomb. The USS Arizona has 600 estimated bodies in its hull. So in order to preserve it, they don't go into it. Well, the thing is, the USS Arizona was fueled that day. And it was full of fuel. And because of that, this happens. which it's not starting. So I will start it really quickly. Quick pause. Okay, try it again. So if you go, why isn't it full screen? Okay. So if you go to the USS Arizona, you will notice these little things that are popping up from the ocean. Does anybody know what that is? It is oil. So that is oil that is constantly leaking from the USS Arizona. They estimate that the amount of oil that will eventually leak from the USS Arizona, it will stop leaking in the year 2150. Well, that's a great question. Why don't we take care of it? Well, there's a couple of reasons. Number one, it is seen as a resting place. The only way to be able to get that oil out is if you took up the entire ship out of the water. The problem is it's more of a moral issue. Is it morally okay to take this ship that has hundreds of bodies in it and take it out? Now, what they do is that when this oil seeps to a certain amount, they'll actually light it on fire in order to dissolve and take away basically this oil. Now, additionally, they do have a net, which you probably never noticed. It's a net that goes around the memorial, and basically what that net does is it traps the oil, and then they're able to take it up and out. So it hasn't been as environmentally impactful as they think. It does leak about 10 gallons of oil per year, but it's just slowly leaking. That's part of the reason it's going to take so long to be able to leak out. There has been questions of whether or not they should eliminate it, but then people say, but it's a resting place. Does that make sense? Now, what if you survived Pearl Harbor? What can now be done? Well, this one's actually pretty cool. You see, if you died at Pearl Harbor, or not died at Pearl Harbor, I should say, if you survived Pearl Harbor, you can actually be interred into the USS Arizona. So what they do is they cremate you, and they put you into this little box that says that you are a survivor of Pearl Harbor. Then what they do is they take that box, and they do like this little presentation. Just a second. They give it to divers, who then take that box and they actually place it inside of the hull of the USS Arizona. Now, overall, 300 different people have been interred into the USS Arizona, which you'll see in just a second. They're just doing the ceremony right now. You don't have to be put in there, by the way. It's not required by law or anything like that. It's by choice. So you can see this is what it looks like right here into the hull. By the way, part of the reason, again, why they don't remove the hull is the hull has become a natural coral reef, and a lot of plants and animals have become home to that USS Arizona, and so that's part of the reason why as well. So some people choose to be buried here. Some people get buried at the Pearl Harbor Cemetery, which is up on top of the hill, or you can just be buried at home either way, but you do get full military honors. So that's kind of what that looks like right there. They just drop it right in. Now, in terms of a local impact, this was about 2 months ago, is that one of the seamen that was killed at Pearl Harbor was finally identified. That body, if you don't know, at Pearl Harbor, they actually have a Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, but it's Pearl Harbor version. So they have this mass grave of people, and they took that person out, and they're now being reinterred here in Utah with their families. Make sense about Pearl Harbor? Biggest thing to know about Pearl Harbor is you need to know it's the trigger point for America going into the war. Okay, that's the most important thing you need to know. All right, and now we are on our next paper, so you need to be on today's notes that you should have picked up. You guys didn't pick it up when you came in? Guys, it's been like a whole year. You had the whole bunch last.
I did.
So I have no idea where you might have put it.
Who's ready?
What?
So So I forgot my backpack in my friend's car, but he has you next period, Adrian.
Adrian Wild. Okay.
So he said, "Oh, go get it for me," but he told me to tell you.
Okay.
And like,
So he's gonna be late. Okay.
That's on me though.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. So we are now heading into what is known as the Homefront. Ooh, can I see? What's the note?
It's a note.
Are you sure? You don't want me to read it?
Sure. I think it's a song lyric.
I ain't Pericutious. And if it was, oh, this is Fergalicious, and that's a swear word.
Why did you give that to me?
I have no idea.
Okay. Why are you guys writing down the Fergalicious lyrics? Okay. All right. So we are now heading into the home front. Now, at the top of this paper, I would like to do a big star and say, really, really important paper. Okay? This is one of those that gets talked about a lot, especially with the movement. AP Board loves minorities, and they love the home front. That's very sweet. Yes. So they have been really big recently into this. So I would definitely expect something, either as a multiple choice SAQ or whatever, is going to be on this paper. I can almost guarantee it. Almost. Because I don't want to give 100% of my eggs in a little basket. Okay? Now, in terms of before that, I just want to give you a little bit of a super brief overview of heading in towards the war. We begin our war over in the Pacific. Why we did that? We care a lot more about Japan than we did about Germany. Reason why is, why do you think we would be more mad at Japan than Germany? Revenge for? Pearl Harbor, right? So we're going to be a lot more hateful at Japan and put a lot of our efforts in. So we begin at Wake Island as we begin to hop closer and closer in towards Japan. The Battle of Midway becomes this massive air scene. By the way, again, you don't need to know any of the battles. So that's one thing that the AP Board does not expect you to know is the battles. Okay? Yep. They don't like the battles. They pretty much never. Because, one, well, what? I know. But the problem is that they're going thematic, like big picture, like what was the effect on the home front rather than this specific battle. And that's what the rewrite as well. Yeah. If you know a ton about the Battle of Midway, throw it in an essay. You could totally use it. You can use anything you want. That's why when we did that Hopewell Furnace field trip, probably nobody there will have heard of Hopewell Furnace, and you can still use it on the AP exam. That's not a she, that's a place. Hopewell Furnace is that agriculture place that we went on the field trip. We learned about coal smelting. We went on a field trip. Weren't you there? We went to Pennsylvania. Don't you remember? No. Okay. Thank you.
The fish on this paper is really scary.
That's Dory.
It's Dory.
It does not look like Dory when you do it.
I'm sorry that the numbers. I had to pick a small one today because there wasn't enough space unless it was going to go on 3 papers. Okay. Anyways, now one of our big things as well is that's a major technological innovation is the use of planes. If you've ever heard of what's known as the Hellcats were a brand new, not brand new, but a better warfare system. They were especially used in the Pacific front with our plane system. They were the really cool ones that you see do the cool like dive bombs. They do loop-de-loops and they go around. If you guys went to when the Thunderbirds came last year, they had the Hellcats came as well. When you go to World War II planes, this is probably the plane that you're talking about. Now, as we continue on, we do go into the Philippines and what's known as Bataan. Now, Bataan is a city in the Philippines. And the Philippines, remember when we talked about like the Spanish-American War and we acquired the Philippines and all that drama happened in the Philippines? So we have an investment in the Philippines. Now, this is where America loses. You see, in this battle, America loses and we go into capture. And what happens is that these Filipinos as well as Japanese have been taught from a young age to hate Americans. So they know that whatever we do, we don't like the Americans. Now, because of that, we begin what is known as the Bataan Death March. And you've probably read a ton of books or heard about this story. Basically, what happens is they are going to march these prisoners all the way across the Philippines to another location. And because of this, they were taught, treat them as if they are not human. So you would be walking and somebody would come up and they would hit you on the head and kill you. You would be walking and somebody would bring up a gun and they would shoot you. There was no prisoner of war. There was, you're hoping to be able to survive at the end. Also, this length of walk was the equivalent of 70 miles over about 2 weeks time period. Why that's important? Imagine trying to walk that far in 2 weeks with somebody at a gun behind you saying if you don't walk faster, you're going to get shot. Yeah?
Is this kind of like the same time period where the movie Unbroken comes from?
Yeah. So Unbroken is not in Bataan.
Yeah, it's not Bataan.
But it's, yeah, well, Japan is affected, but it's not in Japan. So it's in like southern, if I remember correctly, it's like southern China, Malaysia area is where that's at. But it's the same exact thing. The Japanese POW did not treat their POWs well at all. Yeah. Again, part of the reason, too, that this propaganda gets protected about the Japanese. Now, in the end, this death march ends up resulting in the deaths of thousands of American POWs. It was one of the worst POW disasters in world history. And as we begin to expand... Oh, now I remember. I was like, what does this have to do with anything? Okay. Anyways, so as we begin to expand, remember, Philippines and things like that are over here. Why would Japan ally with Germany? Germany doesn't care, right? Germany and Italy are like strong, right? They're not going to do anything. Well, let me explain. See, over here, you have Japan. On this side, you have Germany. This creates, and what I would write down is what is called, and just put it in the box or on the back of the bottom, there's something that says war tactics. I don't care how you do it. You need to know that they allied with Japan, Germany allies with Japan, to create a two-front war. Again, Germany allies with Japan to create a two-front war. Germany knows that if America is split between two sides, they are weaker. And they know that following Pearl Harbor, Japan is going to be their main focus. And America is not going to worry so much about Germany. So, Japan, first after Pearl Harbor, declares war on America. Germany then declares war on America, and now America is involved in the World War. Okay? Now, over on the other side, in England and in the European front, so there's the Pacific front and the European front. That's the two fronts. In the European front, we have a massive battle in the ocean. Now, do you guys remember the name for the German submarine in World War I?
U-boat.
It's a U-boat, right? Now, the U-boats are going to massively expand during World War II. And what happened is we had these large convoys that would go across, and they were just being bombarded in the Battle of the Atlantic. Now, what happens is that these U-boats are going to begin to be attacked. So we are going to go in these convoy systems called a wolf pack. This wolf pack comes together. The wolf pack is going to begin to attack us from the German U-boats. Our major systems are going to start to bomb them, and we begin to destroy the German U-boats. Okay? Yeah?
So by the time the U.S. entered the war, had Britain cracked Midway yet?
So Britain doesn't attack or crack the Enigma machine until, I think, 43 or 44. Because if I remember correctly, it's right before D-Day. And the reason why that was important is because they knew that their tactics at D-Day were working in terms of tricking the Germans, and they used that with the Enigma machine. You can use the Enigma machine in the essays, but it's definitely more of a world history one, because the people who cracked it were the British. But Navajo code talkers who cracked the Japanese code, you can definitely use in an essay about World War II. Okay, so let's take a break from all this and let's do something fun.
Yes.
Okay, because we're going to watch some great cartoons, look at some great posters. They're going to be great. We're going to talk about Donald Duck, which, by the way, with Donald Duck, I realized afterwards, why didn't I do Donald Duck as the connect the dots? I don't know why. I thought Disney movie, and then I Googled it, and then I don't know why I didn't just do Donald Duck, but that's okay. So, if you will take your paper over and flip it to the back, and look at the very bottom where there is a chart. Okay? Now, I know the chart is very small. We were running out of room on this page to include all the activities. Okay? So, what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to show you a piece of propaganda that America put out there. And I want you to think, How is America appealing to you? So how are they appealing to you? Is this effective to you? What are they making you think? Okay? So for, I might have put ad, by the way, because I was making this during Gov class and we were watching political ads. So I meant something different, poster, but that's okay. So, number 1, I want you to again say and answer that question that's on there. How is this appealing to you and is it effective? I now ask the American people to strengthen my faith and give me through the strength of its will, the strength I need to continue to fight courageously at any time for its honor and its freedom, and to be able to further its economic prosperity. I ask it particularly to support me in my struggle for true peace. So who can we guess is saying this?
Soldier.
Probably FDR.
Yeah.
Okay. FDR is the leader here. So I want you to write in that box, how is this appealing to you? How is it trying to affect you as the individual? Okay? You don't have to write a lot, but you're writing in this small little box. All right. So who can tell me what was the appeal here and how was it effective?
They're like, you want some peace, you want some freedom, then you better help me.
Actually,
I agree that it is that. Is it as harsh as you are making it seem like?
Well, basically, that's what he's saying.
Okay, what are some other thoughts? Kate, you said no. What are your thoughts?
I was just saying it's not that harsh. It's more of like an appealing to their quote unquote better nature. Like
Yeah.
you know, there's all these great things that you can have if you help me out a little bit.
Okay, good. Now, by the way, in terms of this, imagine if, for instance, remember when I got sick and I was like, can you guys help me out? That's kind of like the same thing, right? It's appealing to you as the masses. Okay, number 2. Hideki Tojo, the world enemy. So Hideki Tojo, what country is that from? Japan. So Japan, the world enemy. We, the American forces, pay the deepest homage to those who wounded or die in the battlefields. We pledge ourselves to make reprisal of our common enemy, Japan. This is from a poster. So again, what are they appealing to? What are they trying to say here? What's the purpose? Huh? What? Oh. Sorry. Okay. Claire, what do you think?
They like make a common enemy that everyone hates, and so then by doing that, like make the U.S. feel more like unified.
Okay.
Together.
Yeah, exactly. So we must unify together. We have a common enemy in Japan. We want to get rid of them. Very good. Okay, last one, and this one begs a little bit more explanation because there's no photo attached. Okay, so this one, it's in reference to accusations that Italian, sorry. So this is in reference to saying that Italian soldiers had been taking over French territory and then doing terrible, awful things to the women in that area, in particular with rape. So that's what they're referring to here. So it says 1944 defend. It could be your mother, your wife, your sister, your daughter. So what are they trying to appeal here? Okay, A, what do you think? What are they trying to appeal here? What are they saying?
We need to like protect women.
Okay, so we should protect women. And then Nick, I didn't see you raise your hand, but Nick, what do you think? Is it appropriate?
Yes.
Okay.
If you don't help your
Okay? So I think it's the idea, right, that if we don't do something, it could spread further and further, and we can't just ignore those problems because it could be your own family. Yeah?
So also everyone has a mother, wife, sister, or daughter, so it's like it appeals to everyone. It's just like you don't want this to happen. So it's kind of like a message for everyone.
Good.
Kind of like not necessarily that it like will be your mother or whatever, but like it's like that's it's trying to make you like relate, I think,
Yeah.
to like other people so that you go out and help them.
Okay, good. Now underneath the big long box on the right-hand column, you can see there's that big long box. At the bottom there's a little bit of space. I want you to write the number 1 dot. And I want you in just a few words, maybe 6 to 10 words, I want you to explain to me how were these ads effective and why do you feel that way? So how were these ads effective in changing American perception according to your opinion? Again, maybe a sentence. How are these ads used? All right, Zoe, what do you think?
I said yes, that they were effective because
Okay.
it's more applicable to Americans. So, like with this one, again, like it applies to everyone. It could be your mother, or like the president is talking to you, like the president who is America wants
Good.
you to protect America. So it's just kind of more applicable to everyone.
Good. So do you guys see how these ads were like really, really effective? Okay, in convincing people of what you want to do? Well, I played a little trick on you.
Oh no, they weren't effective.
No, they were. They were very effective.
These were Germans.
Yep.
Ah!
So, shock factor. Okay, so the first one that we read, that you guys were saying things like, we need to support our leader needs our help. Well, that was for Adolf Hitler. Okay? I got you guys. Oh, this is good. I'm sorry. It's good for your health to be tricked. April Fools! Oh, good. Well, I wasn't saying to support Adolf Hitler. Okay, hold on. Hey, guys. Jordan.
I just want to say, like, I feel like we didn't really say that we agreed with these ads, but whether they're German or American, like, they were still effective. It doesn't mean, like, any of them have anything to do with, like, what we believe in. It's just how people, like, challenge each other's humanity to say, like, oh, if you don't want to be raped, if you don't want to do this, then you should, you know, do this. And I feel like even if it was in America, it still would have the same effects.
Skipping ahead like 2 slides.
Oh, my bad.
No, that's literally perfect. That's the whole point of this entire activity. The point of this activity is to show, do you guys realize how propaganda can be so effective? I mean, there's people that say, how could you be German and support the Nazis? Because you're reading things like this. Propaganda isn't just here in America. It affects everyone, right? And it appeals to that humanity or that human point. It appeals to you specifically. Yeah, John.
I thought that the Germans were allied with Germany and Italians.
What?
I thought Germany was allied with
The Italians? They are. So, what you're referring to, okay, so just so I can show you, since Jordan skipped ahead just a little bit, but that's okay. She still got the point across. So, the next one, the Hideki Tojo one, was actually Japan saying that about FDR. So FDR is the common enemy. America is the common enemy. We need to get rid of them. Now the last one, which is the Italian one, so it was not specifically against America. What happened is that there were reports of Moroccans that were taking advantage of people when they were taking over these places. So things like this were happening. Okay? So again, the effective use of this propaganda. I know this is shocking, right? But again, that's kind of the use of this propaganda. There was like 3 people with hands raised, but then they put them down. You don't need any more questions? Good? Okay. So what we're going to be talking about a little bit more is, again, why is this propaganda so useful and effective? Now, in the war, we had multiple uses of propaganda. Propaganda is a great thing to talk about in terms of the Homefront because it works really, really well. Now, in terms of the poster war, that's the nickname for all these posters. Now, in terms of pro-patriotism, there was a massive concern that what you guys were doing could immediately affect the entire world. Okay, so for instance, this one right here, loose lips might sink ships. What are they saying could happen? Why don't you stop talking? I will continue to talk.
That's not something
I know. What are we saying?
If you continue gossip and spread rumors and stuff like that, it might get what's the word?
To the Nazis or whatever.
Yes.
So if you're, for instance, oh my gosh, my husband who works at the bomb factory every single day at this location, he is the worst, right? Well, now you got your little Nazi spy who's going to go and take that into Germany and they're going to bomb America, right? Or for instance, wanted for murder. Her careless talk cost lives.
So is this a person, a famous figure, or is it just
No,
women in general?
this is just women in general. Because, and why do you think that is? What's the stereotype about women? They're gossipers. Men would never do this, right? Yeah, that's the idea here. Okay? Okay, listen. Okay? Pro-United States. Now, we've all seen the one on the right? We've all seen this one right here. So this one right here, dear God, keep them safe, buy war bonds. Do you guys, listen. Do you guys remember we talked about what war bonds are and war stamps? So you buy it or you purchase it at the grocery store. The government uses that money as a loan and then they pay you back with interest after the war. So basically, if you don't buy war bombs, what's going to happen to these guys? They're not going to have gas masks, so they die. Right? Aw, it's too bad. Now, in terms of going into more specifics, okay? So, going into the anti-Germans, okay? Biggest thing was make fun of Hitler. Now, if you look over here, it says this is the enemy. You have the Nazi regime. What are they stabbing? A Bible. Remember how important the Bible is in American history, right? Protestantism in America. So what are they basically saying the Nazis are doing? They're killing Christianity. Okay? Big effect. Then you have Hitler over here. Let's catch him with his Panzers down. We will if we keep him firing. If we keep going and fighting against Hitler, what's going to happen? We're going to get him because eventually he's going to be caught completely unprepared and we're going to defeat them. Okay? Now, in terms of the next one, I want to give you a quick warning. Okay? In terms of racism in ads. Okay? You have to understand that, again, what country did we hate the most? Japan. So, okay. All right. So, when I show you these ads, do you understand that I don't support or whatever these ads? But you have to understand that's why they're going to draw them racist, just like we talked about Irish and German. Okay? So, in terms of the war against...
That's terrible.
I know. Again, I don't support these. Okay? So, I think this one's interesting first off, because you guys have learned about the Huns, right?
Mulan.
Huns in world?
Yeah.
Genghis Khan. Okay, what country is he from?
Mongolia.
Yeah, is that Japan? No. Okay, so we're a little inaccurate here. But in terms of this is really where you get why Americans became so racist in World War II with Japanese. It had to do with the idea, again, Japan attacked us, right? So we're already angry at them. Had Germany done this, I think that the Germans would have gone into the same direction. I think we would have done the same. I know. You okay?
I just...
Maybe that's also in an attempt to be able to do that. Okay.
Don't Germans hate everybody but white blonde people, so why are they aligned with Japanese people?
What do you mean? Oh, we just talked about that. So why did Germany support Japan? It was to create a two-front war and to
I
split.
get that, but are they upset with them? I don't understand why.
Who's upset with who? I'm confused.
Okay, so if you're, I don't know. It just seems weird for them to be hypocritical about their allies and then killing minorities.
Well, this is Americans creating this. So yeah, so the Americans are creating this. So in terms of why the Germans supported that, it was a military strategy. The Germans supported Japan for that militarism. Had it been opposite, and Japan had been American territory, I can guarantee they would have done the same thing. And they would have put them in concentration camps probably. But they were allies to be able to have it in military strategy. You boys okay?
Yeah.
You sure? Okay.
So do you think, like, if Hitler would have gone with his world domination plan and actually taken it, do you think he just would have taken over Japan?
Yeah.
After, like, he just would have been
I think once he took over Russia, Japan is right underneath that.
Yeah.
So I think once he took over Russia, and he was spreading into Africa and northwestern Asia as well, I think that it's a very good likelihood that eventually he would have taken over Japan. He would have done the same thing.
For their own death.
Exactly. Because if you think about the USSR, USSR made an agreement with Germany that said if the USSR doesn't get attacked, they'll be allies with Germany, and then Germany 9 months later attacked USSR and broke the treaty. So Germany, I think, would have kept going until the entire world was under their feet. They would have attacked Italy once Italy was gone. I mean, they were ruthless. Yeah.
Where was Canada? Like, what was happening?
Yeah, what was
Always
up with
just
Canada?
chilling.
So Canada, well, here's what I'll tell you. Canada, and while I'm not a complete genius on Canadian history, from what I remember correctly, is following this war is when Britain begins to lose all of their colonial territories, which is where you get Gandhi and India, which is in the 50s and the 60s. If I remember correctly, during that time is also when Canada becomes an independent country, but still relies on Britain. Now, Canada does get involved in this because it's one of the territories. So the Canadian troops are being sent to all this war as if they were part of Britain. I'm not a genius on Canadian history, but I believe that's what happened. Okay? Now, in terms of other ways that they're going to be able to convince people of how you should think, one of them is the creation of comic books. Now, we didn't get a chance to talk about it. I think we might talk about it for a second. But if you remember back in the Great Depression, Batman and Superman, all those were created as a symbol of the Great Depression. Heading into this now, we're going to get the creation of Captain America.
Yes.
Now we have some positives. Yay.
Well, yeah, because Captain
No,
America is
well, I mean, oh, sorry, I didn't even. Okay. Now, okay, listen. Hey, okay, listen. First off, hey guys, why they were able to successfully have this occur. Well, the reason why is because cartoonists and movies didn't have a lot of money in the war. They had lost it during the Great Depression. The war begins. Nobody wants to go and watch some happy-go-lucky film when your boys are dying at war. So they begin to create propaganda. Now, this was partially paid for by the government. The government paid you to the Office of Public Information, which, by the way, is on your notes under propaganda. I would circle that. That's a key one. It's called OPI. If you just think OPI, you can use that without doing the full thing. The Office of Public Information was a government agency specifically to convince you to support the war and hate Germany and Italy and Japan. They were the propaganda era. So what they do is they help sponsor the creation of this. Now, I will say that while Captain America did have instances of having the more racist cartoons, most of them were created as anti-German. So you can see this right here. So over here, okay, you have Adolf Hitler. Okay, you got the Nazis over here. You got Nazism here in the United States, and we're going to punch and kill the Nazis. If you go over here, you see this is actually Hideki Tojo, so not as racist as the other cartoons. Okay, but Hideki Tojo has the American flags, and if you see, they're all going into Japan. And then over here, we're getting into the atomic age, but the missile strikes. Says New York, okay? Missiles coming to New York, we're going to end that. If you have seen Captain America, the First Avenger,
yes.
Okay, that movie, when they talk about, like, I think it's Scorpio, right? That's the right movie. So that whole thing are the Nazis. That entire movie is World War II Nazis. That's who they're fighting in Captain America, First Avenger, is the Nazis. Hydra. Scorpio, I don't remember which one it is. It's been a while since I've seen the movie. Okay?
After they're like, yeah, we're still Nazis.
Right. Okay, or, okay, listen. Or if you've seen the movie Indiana Jones, The first Indiana Jones, they're fighting the Nazis. Okay? All of that becomes propaganda at this time. Okay? Now let's get to the fun one, which is animation and film. Okay? You guys are going to be okay. It's going to be okay.
Okay, I'll be really mad if you ruin any of my favorite characters. I'm just glad.
Okay. So, flip your paper over. And at the very bottom, you're going to see that we're going to do the same activity again. Your goal is to decide why was this film created. Now, what happens is we're going to talk about Walt Disney, which is why Dory is on your paper. I realize now I should put Donald Duck, but that's okay. Dory is on there. Now, Walt Disney was struggling. In fact, when the war began, he pretty much had no money. He actually had to lay off his workers because they didn't have any money to keep them on wages. So the government comes in and says, hey, we can pay you money if you make these films for America that is pro-America, anti-German, and anti-Japan. Basically, Walt Disney gets paid to create propaganda use for America. Now, this is most famous with Donald Duck. Donald Duck would not be as famous as he is today if it wasn't for these films. Zach, did you have a question? Well, so Pixar is owned by the Walt Disney Company.
But it wasn't.
Wait, so Finding Dory?
Yeah.
Finding Dory isn't...
It's Dory. It's
Okay.
Finding Dory, bro. Come on.
Okay, I apologize. Sorry. Okay, so for the first film that we are going to watch today, so you have to understand that each of these were considered films back then. Films back then were not feature length. That's why Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is only about an hour long. They were very short. So the first film that we're going to watch was actually a required education film for your classes. So hold on, this one's more educational. This one's not funny or anything like that. It's more educational. So you were required, it's called The Making of a Nazi, and you were required to watch this film in order to receive an education about what was going on. So you would start this in elementary school. So we're going to play a couple of minutes, and in your box, I want you to write what was the point of this film. Why was this film created? Okay, we're not going to watch the whole thing.
What makes a Nazi? How does he get that way? Well, let's look into the process. To begin with, Nazi control over a German child starts as soon as it's born. A young German couple has come to register the birth of their son.
Heil Hitler!
Heil!
Herr Standesbeamte, wir möchten unseren Jungen anmelden. Unseren Erstgeborenen.
Gib alle Geburtsscheine.
Ja, hier sind unsere Geburtsscheine, die Geburtsscheine unserer Eltern.
Those documents are birth certificates, all the way back to their great-grandparents, proving, of course, that they are pure Aryan.
Wir möchten auch gern wissen, ob wir
The mother wants to call her son Hans.
Dieses Verzeichnis enthält alle männlichen Namen, die für Kinder
Here's the verboten list. Hans seems to be okay for the time being.
Hier ist Ihr Ausweis.
Okay, so I want you to write down in that box, what was the purpose of this? Why would Walt Disney be commissioned in order to watch or to show this? Oh, sorry. I was checking something really quick. Sorry. Okay. So, Gabe, why do you think this film was created? Okay, good, to educate them. Do you think it's pro-Nazi or anti-Nazi?
Well, anti-Nazi.
Well, why do you think it's anti-Nazi?
I think it's showing like how they're like Germany's like total control of its citizens.
Yeah, did you hear when they're like, Hans is good for the time being, right? What is that implying that Germany's going to do? It's just constantly being changed.
I was just gonna say it's kind of like we have a lot more freedom here and to like kind of make it grateful and also be like, aren't you glad you're not there?
Yeah, exactly. Like, hey, America's great here, so don't complain about America because it could be worse.
I also think it was affected because a lot of people in America didn't know German as a language, and so at first they were like Heil Hitler, and so everyone, not everyone, but like it's kind of like known that like that was what you say because it's fascist, right? But then like they start talking in German and you can't understand what they're saying.
You don't really understand what else is happening.
But then the guy is being really harsh, so that shows that like even though you don't understand what's going on, you can still see it.
You can still visually see it even if you don't understand the words. Great observation. Okay. Now the next one that we're going to watch, so again, now we're moving into the slightly more iffy ones. Now let me explain, first off, is that a lot of this is a great example of propaganda. You can use this in your essays. You can explain how America began to portray things. I don't want you necessarily to focus on the portrayal of Japanese. That would be blatantly obvious. But I want you to think, how are they portraying the Japanese? Not just in look, but how are they making them seen? Now, Donald Duck becomes extremely famous. If you've ever heard of, there's a DVD called Donald Duck Goes to War. It's $50. And the reason why is because it has about the 500 cartoons that were created as this propaganda for America. So it's actually extremely, it's really good. It's great. If you ever go to Honolulu, by the way, they have a whole museum about this. So we're going to watch this, and I want you to think, what are they portraying it? And it's supposed to appeal to you guys in a funny way. Oh, no. Okay, never mind. I flipped it. So we're going to go with the German one first. Okay? Now, the German one, I will tell you, I'll be honest, it's fun. It was a really good way of propaganda because this tune, I can practically recite it because I've heard it so much and it's so catchy. So Donald Duck, they make a song and it's going to get you to not like Germany. And I want you to think, how are they portraying the Germans? And Japanese does pop up in there. And it'll be blatantly obvious when the Japanese come up. But I want you to think, how are they portraying the Germans? Oh, nope.
What?
This one first.
In time of war, it's typical, sometimes even useful, to demonize your enemy. We still see this today whenever a dictator or despot comes to power anywhere in the world. Caricatures and jokes, not always in the best of taste, rise to the forefront because it's our way of relieving aggression. So it was in World War II. Some people feared Adolf Hitler. Others mocked him. The Disney staff came up with the idea for a cartoon to be titled Donald Duck in Nazi Land, giving the all-American duck a nightmare that he was living in a country run by Nazis. The title changed when a song written for the cartoon
Oh, just
by
wait.
Oliver Wallace
It's good.
became a runaway hit and a now classic recording by Spike Jones. It then became essential to change the name of the cartoon to De Fuhrer's Face. It's easy to see why the film is so popular. It's very, very funny. Reducing the serious tenets of
No, you'll see. It's pretty good.
And it gave audiences a chance to think, as Donald does, about the freedoms they might have taken for granted. De Fuhrer's Face, directed by Jack Kinney, won the...
All right, so let's watch it. It's a really catchy song. We'll watch most of it.
the Superman? Super duper Superman. Is this Nazi land so good? Would you leave it if you could? Ja, this Nazi land is good. We would leave, but even we could. We bring the world new order. I always hit was rule and order. Every on a foreign race, they'll lock the foreign face when we bring to the world disorder.
I think I said it wouldn't be funny. Do you guys see why this was effective? Okay, so in your second ad, I want you to write down, what was the purpose of this? What are they trying to show? You guys were like, I'm not going to enjoy this. I told you it was funny. There's a reason why this was so effective and why kids wanted to sign up for the military so quickly following Pearl Harbor.
You should do a review session where we just watch World War II cartoons.
So something bad, I guess, about this is when I was in Germany, I was talking to our hosts who are German, and I mentioned Your Führer's Face. They're like, oh, I've never watched that before. So I was like, let me inform you. And they watched that, and they're like, that's hilarious, but it's so anti-German, I feel like I shouldn't like it. But I like it. So that's the thing, is that it's hard because one favorite part of this whole thing is, you guys notice how at the beginning, everything was shaped the Nazi symbol? Yeah. Like all the fence posts and all the bushes and the clouds, everything was that. So it's getting that subtlety, okay? Maybe it's also on YouTube. So you have every availability. Okay? Okay, Zane, what is the purpose of this?
Well, I thought it just showed how brainwashed all the Nazis are and how, they don't really know what they're doing, but they all really like Hitler.
Yeah, did you guys notice that? How they're kind of just, doing the motions and they don't really know what's going on. And then how are their workers treated?
48 hours a day?
Yeah, 48-hour work days. And then you have, these guys that are basically like robots going over and over again. Okay, we're going to do the last one, which is more focused on Japan.
And wipe them out. This mission must be accomplished at all costs. That is all. Prepare to jump.
I told you it was bad.
All right, here he coming. Time for shooting now, please, I hope. No, wait, please. Japanese customs say, always shooting a man in the back, please. Go, psycho.
Hey. I told you it was going to be bad. Now, again, why do you feel like they made the more racist tones with the Japanese? Because they hated Japanese because of what event? Pearl Harbor. Again, I told you it was bad. Don't act like you didn't know. No, we have like 1 minute left in class. Oh. Okay, I thought you didn't want us to. You were so against it.
No, I didn't know that it was like the Dharma. I've seen all of these. The German one is funny.
Okay, so finish that last box, and then we will continue on next class. We will finish World War II next class.